We're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on all the NFL action. Great offers every single game. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of the week's epic matchups. Walk away an instant winner. DraftKings is not stopping there. All customers take advantage of 2 new offers every game this September. Football's more fun when you're in the action, no question about it. Download the app now. Sign up code Colin. That's me, Colin. New customers bet just $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL with the code Colin. The crown is yours.
Yeah, I mean, if you put the 25 to 30 best throws of Zach Wilson's career on a film, on a tape, 20 were tonight. He was, you know what was interesting, John? So he didn't play with a ton of confidence first quarter. Chiefs made some mistakes. He had a good drive, gained confidence. Third quarter played with a ton of confidence. And then fourth quarter played well, had a fumble. But it's interesting. He is a player, and I saw a little bit of this with Justin Fields today. He's a momentum player. Like, you know, when Mahomes started struggling, it sort of empowered him. Like, hey, we're all human here. I'm playing pretty well. He's always had a good arm, but it was like he found some golden touch, some confidence. You saw him grow in the game. And if he was just that, which is, you know, missed an open throw in the end zone, should have had a fumble. If I got this team could win 5-6 in a row. I mean, I don't know. It's just, it's strange. Both Justin Fields and Zach Wilson today, it was like something happened. Star quarterbacks, you know, came back down to earth and they felt empowered and played pretty well.
I think confidence is a powerful thing for young players. I mean, I think confidence is a powerful thing for young people, right? I mean, I think it was on full display today, right? Guys like Kenny Pickett and Mac Jones completely unraveling. It's not like they have a 10-year career to lean back on. And you saw Zach Wilson today. It looked for a second like the Chiefs were going to win this game 50-0. I mean, early on, it was like they're going to play a lot of Taylor Swift here to keep this thing going. Right. The safety, then it flipped, then he hit a couple passes. And listen, the players, whether they love the guy or not, they want to play well. So that what happens? A lot of the receivers start going over there. They start picking him up. He makes a couple plays. And the place kind of erupts. I mean, they've had 2 nights now in the first month of this season where when it's been going good, that place has been electric. I've watched a lot of games in MetLife. It's not the most, it's not exactly an SEC football game, but this Jets team and just what's going on this year, especially tonight, Rodgers in the house, Swift in the house, that was fun. I mean, it's something that didn't feel like it was going to happen, kind of came out of nowhere. That was an enjoyable 3 quarters.
Well, I think it's mostly a young team with a young, highly passionate coach. And you can sometimes mirror your coach. And I think they play like Sala would play. Young teams, Green Bay, you make more mistakes, you tend to play in streaks. I mean, the Packers have been like terrible first half, great second half. The Jets do that, terrible first quarter, great second quarter. So I think young teams, you see this in basketball all the time, young player. Jordan Poole's a great example. It just depends on the quarter. They're very streaky. So, I think the Jets, listen, after watching Buffalo today, it's like, and the Jets beat Buffalo, either we should disregard the first game of the season, or we can see that the Jets can line up pretty much with anybody physically. Becton was okay tonight. You know, he's not great, but he was capable. And if he becomes capable, your O-line, Vera Tucker's good on the inside, then you're like, okay, we can hang around. Early in the season, you had bad Zach, bad O-line. Now Dwayne Brown's out. Becton comes in, can block a little. It's like, okay, this is because Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson are really nice players.
I talked to a personnel guy this week, and he said if you look at the way the Jets built their defense, what happened when Rodgers went out, it really screwed them because they weren't built like with Tony Siragusa and Luke Kuechly. You know, C.J. Mosley's an overrated player, but they were built to get a lead and then just tee off Peyton Manning style, you know, with Dwight Freeney, Mathis, and just get after you. They got one good corner, and they were built to have a 17-7 lead and know you were going to pass. But what happened the moment Rodgers tears his Achilles? They've been down, and they get in these rock fights, and they're not built that way. Right. You know, you can run it on them, but if they get a little lead or they're just in the game, and Andy, regardless what the score is, historically likes to throw the ball, that plays to their strengths on defense. The last couple weeks, it's a 10-0 game, and it's just like they can just run it. The Jets have no shot. But tonight, when it's 3rd and 10, if they can get you in 3rd and long, and you're not, have a 10-point, 15-point, 17-point lead, they got a shot because their defensive front is pretty special as pass rushers. They're not just going to hold the point. I mean, they wouldn't play the 92 Cowboys very well, but a team like the Chiefs, maybe a team like the Bills, they can at least hang because you like to pass. And I think you saw that tonight. And obviously, Zach, I think the hard part is, though, Colin, a lot of players, once you get to that level, you have the talent. What makes you just a solid player is just being able to consistently do it. And we've really only seen him be able. He's had 2. Last year he had a Steeler game. I remember he was really good. And this year he's had 1 game. But what's the likelihood of him doing that again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons C.J. Stroud has been so remarkable is I feel like I get the same game from him. He doesn't even have Zach's arm. That's not what he's about.
No.
He can move better than Goff, but that was his comp. Sit in the pocket, give him protection, throw it. But with Stroud, I feel like I get the exact same. Every time I watch him, I'm like, yeah, I kind of know what I'm getting. And it's pretty high functioning. And with Zach, you get fumbles. You get, it's interesting too. He's 6'2" and 218. And I always think he looks small. Rodgers is 6'1.5", 225, and I never think that. Mahomes is 6'2", 225. I never think small. It's the shoulders. He's got kind of a Johnny Manziel build, like small hips, small shoulders.
Yeah.
And so he is one of those guys that I think he throws the ball better on the outside because he has a clear passing lane. Tua's talked about that before. You can see it with sometimes Russell Wilson. There are certain players. I feel like Zach, when he's moving and throwing outside, he's got a whip. He's got a beautiful arm.
Well, I think Fields falls under that today too. Once you get him moving around using athleticism, you don't have to think. It's not 1, 2, 3 Mississippi. I got to get rid of this ball. I got to go from right to left. I got to diagnose the defense. Move him to the right, move him to the left. I basically have one option, maybe 2, and then I'm running forward. That's the simplicity even at the highest level of football. Only so many guys, right? And Mahomes, for his standards, was pretty shitty tonight. But he, like many other great players, can just sit in the pocket and pick you apart when they're dialed in. That's very difficult to do. Only a small percentage of people at that position have been able to do it. Zach, most guys, he's not alone, but you can put him in more advantageous situations.
Yes.
And then once you hit a couple of those, you're more likely to hit the pocket pass, which he did tonight, which you went, damn, that looked like a guy that you would draft high. He definitely had some of those throws tonight.
Yeah, and I think Saleh deserves credit. They ran the ball enough, play action. They rolled the pocket. I thought they set him up to succeed tonight. They moved the pocket. It looked different, used a lot of different players. I think, and to your point, is at any one time, I remember Mahomes talking about, and I think Mahomes cognitively, I've never seen a player who can see something and get the ball there faster. He just is a whip. Look at how that game ended. How many guys walk right into the end zone? No one would have blamed him. The game ends too. Yeah,
hits the ground. That was like a Brady Belichick level move in their prime, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's playing chess. I mean, Mahomes is going and he and Reed are going 1,000 miles an hour upstairs. But I do think there's ways as players develop to let them succeed, and I think it's moving the pocket, play action, leaning into your run game. Now, I thought Saleh was super conservative on 4th downs in the first half, more conservative than I would have been. But in the end, his takeaway is there was a 4th and 1. He's like, hey, if we don't get it, it's points for Kansas City. So he was a tad, Saleh, more conservative than I like. But I also understand that he was seeing in the second quarter how much Mahomes was having trouble. That's about as poorly as Mahomes plays. So I'm not a huge moral victory fan, but I think you come out of that game a little impassioned. I think you're energized if you're the Jets. I sat back and I said, they're giving Kansas City some of these problems are just New York is speeding up the game for Mahomes. It's hard.
To me, the key, though, is you got to build on it next week. Like your next game, you have to look good or they turn. Because you could feel the last couple of weeks, the New York negativity, it was coming. And rightfully so. They had earned it.
Right.
And then tonight, it felt like a completely different football team. So all of a sudden, you win a game next week, or I don't know. I don't think they have a bye, and you're 2-3. Then all of a sudden, it feels like you said, why couldn't you rattle off 4 or 5 and then all of a sudden be in the wild card mix? And I think on the flip side, this Chiefs team, is just a completely different version than the first iteration of the Mahomes era. I mean, they are defensive. They have, I mean, Andy's had some good running backs over his career. Obviously, when he got to Kansas City, Jamal Charles, Shady McCoy, some of the Westbrooks and Deuce Staley. This Isaiah Pacheco is like a throwback guy from the 80s. So you get this physical presence. And even Andy, who wants to pass it every play, knows he's got to give it to this guy. And now he's clearly right. Kelsey's their best weapon. This guy's their second best weapon. And they're defensive, run game, tight end. This is a lot different than the scoring 48 points a game, Chiefs. But this is sustainable too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons the Chiefs had trouble in the second quarter, the Jets' corners are outstanding.
For sure.
And so the bottom line is nobody was open. And I do think at the trading deadline, Kansas City, I feel like they would go, if there was a Juju Smith-Schuster type player, just who was very productive for them, just a guy that's good after the catch, kind of a physical banger, an experienced guy, because I think that's the hole. But to your point, this is the fastest defense Kansas City's had under Mahomes. It's the youngest, cheapest, and fastest. But also, by the next draft, you have to start considering, for Kittle and Travis Kelce, drafting tight ends. These guys take a lot of hits. And so overall, great teams win on bad nights on the road. That's Kansas City. Philadelphia didn't play very well today. I mean, their defense got shredded.
Washington has their number, though. Certain teams in certain sports, the Trailblazers forever with Lillard and CJ always played the Warriors well, even when they had Durant. Washington now 2 years in a row. Remember, they beat them last year, I think, on Monday Night Football. Today, they easily could have won that game. They were in control the majority of it till some of Philly's athletes just made plays. That's the thing. Like, you watch a team like Philly, the Niners, their skill guys look more like the 19 Chiefs than this Chiefs team, right? I mean, the talent at the high end, when you have that much firepower, a 60-minute game, if your quarterback's good, you're just never really out of the game unless you're down 20.
All right, let's talk Patriots-Cowboys. So Zach Wilson can struggle. Justin Fields can struggle. But I never doubt they have talent. They both move and can throw. Today, Mac Jones looked untalented, looked overwhelmed. So here's what we know to be true. The Patriot coaches, I've been told this and it's been written, were furious with him last year. Like, just didn't like him as a player. McEnroe Jones, bratty, the cheap shots. It just looked bad for the culture. And so we know that's documented. Belichick was furious with him. We also know he's had several of these moments, and I've been told last year he was called out by one of his offensive linemen. He's had several of these moments, chippy, hitting guys, kicking. That doesn't play well in pro sports, because what players think is if you're doing that to them, they can do that to us. So that doesn't play in a locker room at all, this chippy stuff. The Grayson Allen stuff doesn't play. And then today, completely listless, no energy, completely overwhelmed with Trayvon Diggs out, Micah Parsons hurt briefly. I thought it was one of those, I wrote this down, is that I think there's 10 teams that are going to draft quarterbacks. Some of them, I think Atlanta, Vegas, Tampa, very early. And then probably, Rams, Green Bay, Minnesota, maybe a little later. I put down 10 teams. And I put New England in the sooner than later. Like, he's not popular in the locker room. He looks overwhelmed and untalented. The bratty, cheap shot stuff. I don't know where his alliances are in the organization. I don't know. Justin Fields, those guys still in that locker room, I think they like him. Zach Wilson, you can see his teammates, his receivers come to him. Watch Mac Jones on the sideline. Who's an ally in that locker room?
My thought coming into training camp, once we knew all the AFC rosters, is that Mac Jones was inevitably going to end Bill Belichick's career. Now, I hate to say get him fired, because it sounds like, Joe Judge gets fired. If coaches like that get fired. I don't know how this ends. Mutual departation. It's over. Like, this team's terrible. And it starts, their quarterback play is horrendous. Like you said, he's not talented enough. I remember when Kyle Shanahan liked him, and I thought, it is insane. No player of this talent has ever been drafted this high. In my opinion, he's more, even based going back to college, more third, fourth round pick. That's where guys of Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, those guys go in the third, fourth round. And unlike those guys, his floor, he can't reach it right now because he's so mistake prone. His turnovers are awful, just outrageous. I mean, they never end. It's pick sixes. He could have thrown multiple pick sixes today as a fumble. He just feels like most lopsided game and loss of Bill Belichick's career. I mean, the Cowboys, they're not bad. I mean, they're a solid 12-win team. 38-3. I mean, that was that was a bloodbath. And Belichick, there was the one when he was going like this on his head. What's his other pitch? It's not like, well, I just throw a change up now. What does he do? You can't go to the bullpens. It's not like Zappy's any good. They're screwed. And listen, they missed the playoffs last year. This team feels worse. Judon got hurt. Now it's starting to unravel a little bit. And it's clearly not, well, it's Matt Patricia calling the plays. No, they got a grown-up calling the plays. I mean, this team looks, I know he's an all-time great coach, and I believe that. But this individual team, even with him, 5-6 wins? I mean, look how hard the division is, let alone just how they play in general.
You know what's interesting, too? He's regressed. So when he first gets to New England, his rookie year, again, you haven't lived with him long. You haven't traveled with him much, right? You haven't been through crisis with him. He had a pretty good rookie year.
They made the playoffs.
Just like when you're a coworker, you're an employee the first year. You win some games, you're like, I kind of like Bob. And then you work with him a second year. You travel with him, multiple camps with him, practices with him. Have you noticed he seems less popular today? He has less allies today. He's one of those players. I mean, I had somebody who I respect, a former Patriot, recently out east, use the word brat. Like he's bratty. Like, and I think you told me this last week or the week before. As long as you're loved in the room, nobody cares outside of the room.
No,
I do not think. I think the coaches have tolerated him. Today I know it feels like I'm being hyperbolic here. It feels like today was a tipping point. Like the coaches are just like, all right, they have to go to Kraft and say, Bob, we have to draft the quarterback.
Do you think that if this thing gets really ugly, and it's sure headed that way, they win 6 games? Bill's always been a little prickly with Robert, but he's making them so much money. They're winning so big. You deal with it. Now this back-to-back years, let's say they win 13 games over a 2-year span. Maybe they just go, it's time for a change. Does Bill, because I was thinking about this, like if you're the Charger or some of these other teams, or is he just too old and too curmudgeon-y? He's kind of fascinating, right? Because his resume's unprecedented. I mean, yeah. But it's like, he's not a spring chicken. He's not Mr. Get Along with everybody.
Here's the other thing. We always thought they were just such a smart football team. They make the same mistakes as everybody post Brady. They're not
worse.
They make special teams blunders. So, Brady covered up a lot of issues with this team. He was so good pre-snap. He got you out of trouble. It's like a good boss. You don't really know the trouble you would have been in. He gets you out of it before your company's in it. Brady got this team out of a lot of trouble.
But it gets back to Tom also worked basically as like his second job was also a coach. I mean, you talk to Edelman and Gronk and all these guys, what was tolerated in practice? It wasn't just Bill setting the tone. It was Tom setting the tone. So the screw-ups didn't happen in practice. What's Mac going to do? Yell at you for running the wrong route on Thursday? So it kind of unravels from within because Tom set the tone from a leadership standpoint that's unreplaceable. And it shows now their talent. I mean, their margin for error was already so slim. They were going to have to win games, like 17-15. And if Mac's going to play, like a bottom 5 quarterback, they don't have a snowball's chance in hell at this rate.
For a limited time, you can save up to 40% off on an NFL Plus premium annual subscription when you sign up through Plus Play from Verizon. Plus Play. It is a platform where you can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already love, like NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. So you can watch multiple games all at once on any screen around you for updates Never miss a touchdown. That simple. And for fantasy players, NFL Plus Premium makes all the difference. Access to programming like Fantasy Live through the NFL Network. Red Zone for tracking player performances on a Sunday. Access to live local and primetime games. Access to Fantasy Plus. Just go to Verizon.com/NFL to get NFL Plus Premium today. 40% off. That's 40% off an annual subscription, just $59.99 for the full season. Get it before it's gone. You have a Niner take. I had a Brandon Staley take. So when Asante Samuel at the end of that game intercepted the ball, and apparently Brandon Staley was telling him to get down, get down. And I thought to myself, there's been so many gaffes, so many snafus from Staley. And my takeaway is if there had been 48 seconds or a minute 4, but there wasn't. There was like 2:30, 2:40 on the interception. And you're deep in your own territory. And my takeaway was, as a coach, if Asante Samuels had intercepted that and just gone down the sideline, as he was going down the sideline, you could say, sit at the 50. But to sit at like your 8 or wherever it was. So my takeaway was, oh God, you're just overthinking it. I don't know what the analytics are. If you intercept a ball and it can be a pick 6 and go up 14, just go. Just go. Now, the theory is, well, you may never get the ball back. They could get the onside. There's like 250 left. So that really bothered me. Should it? Or is analytically that's understood?
Yeah, I mean, I just let them run. Why are you telling them to get down at all? They play in the same game every week for 2 years and 4 games, don't they? I mean, they got a big 4th down with under 3 minutes to go. The other team is driving with a chance to tie it or take the lead. They play. Honestly, you could even go back to the Phillip Rivers days. It feels like this team's cursed. I mean, the Raiders are so far gone, they're not even worth saving. But the Chargers, with this quarterback who he's proven his physical capabilities, his production, his toughness now a couple years in a row. What was it? Last year he had the rib or spleen injury. This year is fingers pointing the other way and then him battling through. What more could you want? Think how many franchises are watching this and how many GMs and former GMs, what they would have done for a chance of a talent like that.
Listen,
to build the team, get a coach.
He bailed Staley out. So, then they run the ball on the clock and the Raiders use a timeout. So they have to get a first down or they're punting it from their end zone. And he hits a beautiful, perfect deep throw. And you're like, you and I are on the West Coast. I wonder if people like Midwest who are watching their own games East understand what's happening here with the Chargers.
No chance.
Justin Herbert is literally saving the franchise. Staley is sometimes they overthink, then they underthink. I watch this team, and if I'm Tom Telesco, this roster's really, really good. Today,
Khalil Mack had 6 sacks. 6.
So
it's
they won this game without 5 starters. I mean, they have depth. They have players everywhere. Even if they're a playoff team, it's pretty remarkable that a coach would go playoffs back to back and be fired. But I think it's been so discussed. Los Angeles is a very kind of laid back, chill market. It's not Philly, Boston, New York.
No.
You read the LA Times. You go to message boards. You listen to sports talk radio in LA. Staley is the topic of conversation every Monday.
Yeah, I mean, I think because the quarterback's so good, he might be able to will him to 10 wins. And you're right, they're in the playoffs. But with their lack of discipline, decision-making, defense, you never know what you're going to get. It's hard to see them winning a playoff game, let alone several. So I think that the elephant in the room, though, is even if they were to get rid of him, would they ever be willing to pay for a big-time coach? Because you see around just this sport, the impact of high-end coach. I mean, San Francisco, Christian McCaffrey, I think I can't imagine there's ever been a better midseason NFL trade in the history of the league. Last week, he broke Jerry Rice's record, 12 straight TDs. This week, he tied Emmitt Smith's record, 13 straight touchdowns for a team. Next week, he has a chance to break it, longest since 1990. So you're talking about a guy that, and I thought it was kind of crazy too, running backs, 2022, he had been banged up. I'm like, wait, you're going to give a second, a third, and a fourth? He would have been worth 3 seconds, thirds and fourths for his impact on the 49ers.
Yeah.
He is easily, I think Josh Allen threw his hat back in the ring. Lamar's having a pretty awesome season, but he's right there. If it ended today, he would have every bit as good of a chance as anyone to be the NFL MVP. And he's clearly one of the best players in the league. And he's taken a team that was pretty damn good, right? They were in the conference title a couple years ago. They were in the Super Bowl. And Purdy's an upgrade over Jimmy, clearly. But Christian has become like a superstar. I remember being a kid when they signed Deion Sanders. Niners never looked back, and they dominated. It's different because he's an offensive player, but it's similar in terms of the impact. It's like it's impossible, despite his production, which is freaking elite, to quantify how good this guy is.
Well, listen, Debo is a Hall of Fame talent, and Kittle probably makes the Hall of Fame. They almost shrink when they're on the field with Christian McCaffrey. I mean, like Kittle 2 years ago, pre-McCaffrey, that was your third down target. You couldn't wait to watch Kittle play. He's still remarkable. When he's on the field with Christian McCaffrey on a big third down, it's like Debo and Kittle become second-tier players, and they're Hall of Fame. Kittle's going to make the Hall of Fame. So it's like McCaffrey is that rare athlete that among other great athletes, it's like this kid for the Rams, Puka Nacua. I keep waiting. It's like, this is insane.
It's nuts.
He's physical. He gets open. He reads corners like a 12-year veteran. He manipulates him. It's like, oh, that's just different. I mean, among other elite players. So, and the thing about McCaffrey, despite his size, he's one of the most physical running backs I've ever seen. And I mean, seriously, he plays 3 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier.
Well, David Shaw pounded the table when he was coming out. I was wrong. I thought, I bet he turns into more of like an Edelman Welker, and he's more receiver than he ever is true down running back. He is, I mean, this is going to sound like a Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith. I mean, he's a true, Kyle's giving it to him 20, 25 times a game. And it's not at the corners. It is right up the gut. Him breaking tackles. He'll lower his shoulder. He's really more of like a throwback to his dad's era of a guy that would have thrived in the 90s. And now I think, to me, the Cowboys, a little bit of a front-running team. When they get a lead on you, which they've done 3 out of the 4 games, run you out the building, as they did, and they're celebrating. It's awesome. Their defense pins their ears back. They got into one kind of dogfight when they were down, and they crumbled. And now they're playing the Niners Sunday. The Eagles, I give them some credit. They have not played their best football, but their talent, like the Niners, they've been through, the ups and downs. They've handled, like today was not an easy win.
Right.
And I think when you look at the Niners and the Eagles, the amount of high end, both teams could have 10 Pro Bowlers. 10, all pro guys.
Right.
When those two teams shake out, but the Cowboys, I just don't think they're quite on their level. I think those two teams are the top tier of the NFC, and then the next tier is the Cowboys, and probably then the Lions.
Yeah, I think there's a way Dallas has to play. And I think, again, Buffalo, I think, is more talented, but is similar. They're an avalanche. When Buffalo gets a lead on you and you're struggling with Josh Allen and he's in a groove and Davis is getting open with Diggs and now Kincaid and Knox, it's like, shit, this is just too much. They play downhill.
And he turns into John Elway, basically, like he did today. There's no stopping that.
Like I think, whereas I think San Francisco and Philadelphia can win multiple ways, I tend to think certain teams, Buffalo is this way. I think Dallas is this way. They're momentum teams. And when they're headed downhill, watch out. They're even more lethal than a San Francisco or Philadelphia because they can score so quickly and they're so aggressive, so hyper aggressive. Miami, let's talk Miami, Buffalo. What is interesting, because I did think Buffalo would win. I did not. I had a good day of gambling, 4-1, 4-0 in the afternoon games. But my takeaway is what really changes is when you can get pressure with 4 guys and without bringing people. Ed Oliver today was very good. Yeah. Is that the way to disrupt Miami is it's tried and true. It was the way to beat Peyton Manning or any great quarterback is you get pressure with 4. And then you occasionally bring other people. Should I read into anything that Miami was just boat race, just overwhelmed, man overboard? Or is it just one of those, they came off a huge game on the road against the rival, it was bound to happen?
I think it's more they're going on the road to a team that's won their division 3 years in a row, who 2 of the last 3 years have won 13 games and have a quarterback who I'd say this year has got a chance to be the MVP of the league. Well, when he's on, and he's been like this the last couple of years. Buffalo had to win that game. right? I mean, you're talking about they've already lost. So all of a sudden Miami would have technically, they'd have 2 losses. They would be undefeated. This was a team that they should have beaten twice last year. Remember, Buffalo had the weird loss to them when they outgained them, and every statistic was in their, on their side. To me, this was a draw in the line game for Sean McDermott, who's taken over the defensive coordinator. And like you said, he got after him. Tua hasn't been touched, right? And the other thing is they've been running it down the hill, like untouched on everyone. So slow him down from the running game, hit Tua, and have Josh Allen be an all-pro level guy. That formula in general, you're going to be able to play with anyone in the league, right? Stephon Diggs, when he's humming, he's a top 2 or 3 quarter or a wide receiver in the league. And that, in terms of home field advantage and big picture, is Miami going on the road in the AFC to Kansas City, to, I don't even know, I guess, obviously Buffalo. I don't know who would be in the North, maybe Baltimore. That's, historically, it hasn't always been Miami doesn't win those games under 40 or 35 degrees. Well, what would change the way this team plays? Their defense is terrible.
Yeah, no, I think that's in the AFC, the best teams, Buffalo, can get after you defensively. Kansas City can get after you defensively. You start looking, even the Titans, the way they played today, can get after you defensively. We know Baltimore always figures out a way to get after you defensively. And then you start looking around and you're like, yeah, Miami really can't. Now, Jalen Ramsey comes back. Listen, this is Vic Fangio, and they're struggling.
They don't have the players.
They just don't have the players. And so, listen, New England gave them fits in Foxborough in the second half. I think Miami is I think they're the best team to watch offensively. I think they're smart and clever, and it's a little bit of a fireworks show. But today is a great example of, and I think they're really well coached. They just have some personnel limitations. They don't have a lot of guys that would start for Buffalo on defense, maybe 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think today was a day when, Tua, once everything's not schemed. I mean, there were some plays on their first couple drives. You're like, geez, Louise, Mike, he's got, Tyreek Hill in the backfield. He's got guys motioning. I thought it was incredible. He was the MVP so far. You realize how special their offensive coordinator is. But once you just have to play football straight up against a team that you're equal, maybe even slightly better on the road, it becomes a lot more difficult. So to me, they got a lot to prove. Just historically, they've never done it. And think of all the teams in the AFC that play in the cold. I like Buffalo. If he's going to play under control, their quarterback has a chance. I mean, he is an all-time great talent, but to have the best year of his career, because after that first week clunker where it was like, God, we had to red flag that situation. The last 3 weeks, he's been brilliant. I mean, he's been, you could argue, the best player in the league.
Yeah, I think I think I talked about this earlier, is that because once the schedule was lengthened the game, I think a lot of GMs and coaches scaled back on playing guys in the preseason, and they kind of used the first week as a little bit of a regular season game with a preseason feel on snaps.
Yeah.
You can't take much from the first game. Seattle looked awful. Buffalo looked awful. Maybe that is what Pittsburgh is. They looked awful.
Yeah, they're not good.
I will say this before we go. I had said during the summer is that I always think, because I would love to be a GM in the NFL, never going to happen. But if I didn't do this, that would be my choice. Probably be yours, just to run an NFL franchise. Is that I always think in free agency, the big mistake is the splashy moves. There's a lot of B. If you take your time and get through the first 4 days, there's a lot of B moves. And I thought Houston made several of those. Just get a little better at running back, a little deeper at receiver, a little better on the offensive line. And D'Amico Ryans, as we both know, was really respected and loved in San Francisco. Stud. They really felt like they lost a little bit of the soul of their defense. And then all of a sudden, it's such a dysfunctional organization, but they made a lot of these kind of like B moves, B plus, just get slightly better, kind of Bill Parcells, get better in the locker room, the weight room, the culture, just get a second tight end, a backup, just interior lineman. Everything feels better. And they did. And then CJ Stroud, the team makes no noise. They don't talk a lot. Stroud just sits back and throws the ball confidently. And there's not a ton of juice, but I got to tell you, I don't think it's a fluke. I think they look like a well-coached team that knows exactly what they are. And I sat there today and I watched them and I thought, this isn't a fluke. Now we're in week 4. That's a pretty solid football team. That's my view on the surprise team in the league. Houston's a solid, not great. They'll meet up with their talent level at some point, but I think they're a pretty solid team that's well coached.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a little burrow to his game. You know, he's not a great athlete, but he can move. He's really accurate. I mean, he has thrown the ball, pushed the ball down the field, very calm and collected. I mean, you watch him the last couple of weeks, he doesn't look like a guy playing the fourth game of his career. He looks like a guy who's been 6 years in the NFL. And obviously, from a coaching standpoint, this guy, I think he's got a chance to be like a Mike Vrabel. I think he already is. I mean, he's a stud. I mean, he's the real deal. I don't know how good they will be as the season goes on. Are they more likely to win 6 than 9? Probably. But this is definitely a team. They got a lot of firepower in the draft. That's the other thing. Remember, they're not done getting that back from Cleveland. Cleveland still owes them, I think, their first round pick this year. So I think Houston, who knows? That division, I mean, the Titans are just this gritty, ugly. I mean, Jacksonville, I think Atlanta's terrible. One thing that hit me this morning, how come, like last night, LSU, Ole Miss, I have zero ties to the South. I don't care about, like, I've never been, I don't know anyone that goes to SEC schools. I've honestly never even been there. Like, I didn't go there scouting or whatever. I am just mesmerized by their games. I'm glued to my couch watching LSU, Ole Miss. Yet whatever the NFC and AFC South, like the morning game, I don't even want to turn. I just think it's irrelevant. Why does college football for them feels so gigantic on TV, and then an NFL game, even one that sat by itself this morning, felt like, yeah, I'm going to watch the news or something before the morning games come on.
Yeah, well, there's been some quirky owners.
Some about the brands too.
Yeah, and I also think there haven't been. I mean, Brady drops in on the Buccaneers, but before Brady, they'd never had a great quarterback in the entire franchise. They'd had great players everywhere. They'd never had a great quarterback. Atlanta's had a lot of Chris Chandlers, Matt Ryan. Matt's more than capable. But I think Jamie. I mean, if you look at Carolina, Jake Delhomme, Cam Newton,
Ryan Tannehill, Mariota.
Yeah,
there's a lot of these type players down there.
It's always been an athletic conference. Those rivalries are bigger if you live in the South. You know, the Saints in Atlanta is a bigger rivalry if you live in the South. But I tend to think AFC South, NFC South, that the SEC is so big. It's almost why pro sports is so big in the Northeast and the West that it shrinks college football, right? And I think college football is so big in the South, it kind of pulls down the NFL. But it just seems to me that the NFC South, Breeze wasn't drafted by the Saints. They went and got him. It's Brady entered at the end of his career. I don't see a lot of historically great quarterback play in that division. Maybe it's some of its ownership. I don't know. I feel like in the Northeast, baseball and the NFL mean more.
Big time.
I feel in the West, the NBA just means more. And so you get better GMs, better scouts. The owners pay a little more. You have really wealthy owners, Ballmer, Joe Lacob, Paul Allen. You've had some really wealthy Western owners. Now the Suns have one of the richer owners. So I always tend to, if there's a theme or a trend, I always look to ownership or passion. Like if you don't win baseball games, they'll just fire you in the Northeast. You're just done, right? Same in the West. You don't win. I thought Terry Stott was a good coach in Portland. Boom, out.
I know,
right?
So I'm with you.
Yeah, so they're just. I think in certain regions, certain things matter more.
Last thing on college, really quick. It really hit me yesterday. This year's wide open, right? I mean, there are 8 to 10 teams that can win it. How is this? This is Harbaugh's opportunity. I think his team's pretty good. Yes. That quarterback is better than I thought he was.
Yep.
Like this is, I mean, he'd have to beat a Sark. This Georgia team's not as good. Now LSU's down. Notre Dame, Ohio State. USC can't play any defense. 2 years ago, that Georgia team, he ran into a buzzsaw, got his ass kicked. Last year, dropped the ball. You got to beat TCU in that situation. This year, he's got to beat Ohio State, and then it's wide open for him. I think the gates have opened for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan to take advantage. And if he's an all-time great coach, which I think he is, you got to win a championship, and this year's right there for him.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we know now he's very successful. He not only it took Brian Kelly a lot of years to get Notre Dame, these northern schools. They're not LSU, USC, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, where your state has so many players that you can really dominate your state. Brian Kelly, you have to ask kids to come play in cold weather. Jim Harbaugh, you have to ask players. It's convinced them.
School's hard.
School's hard. So if Northern, James Franklin now feels like he has his best team.
He does.
I think it's about a 4 or 5 year process in the North Washington. Chris Peterson got it going, I think, year 2 to year 3. But I always feel it's a little easier in the South because the states are so productive with recruiting.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it took Kelly and Harbaugh about 5 or 6 years to really, they were good early. I think Jim won 10 games year 1 and Kelly won big. But they were kind of fraudulent teams, right? Like they couldn't run with Ohio State or Georgia. I think right now, Georgia's quarterback played well this weekend, but I think the question becomes if he gets to the championship, win or lose, and I think they could win, he can be really picky because I think Jim realized something in the NFL is you can be a great coach, but if you don't have the guy pulling the trigger, there's just limitations on what you can do. Yeah. And now you have Josh Allen in his prime and Lamar in his prime and Herbert in his prime and Mahomes in his prime. You can't take a second. You can't go into this league with a second-tier quarterback. No. Jalen Hurts. You just can't do it anymore. So it's different than when Jim left. It's more quarterback-centric, and there's all these guys that weren't in the league, and they're all in their primes. So I think you have to be really picky. Chargers job, I would absolutely take.
100%.
If Zach Taylor got run in 2 years, I would look into that. But it's when Jim left this league, you didn't have all these Trevor Lawrence, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Lamar. These guys weren't in the league.
No,
so it's a whole different ball game. You can still be physical, but as great as Vrabel is as a physical guy, he's kind of a one and doneer in the playoffs. He just doesn't have, and Tannehill's not terrible. He's competent.
Yeah, and he's even maxed out. Even if he maximizes his team, which he's doing, what's he going to win? 9 games?
Yep.
Right. He can only go so far. So a lot going on. What a first month of football, huh?
It was great. John Middlekauff, 3 and out in the volume. Good seeing you, buddy.
See you, Colin.